mass immigration, refugee crises, culture clashes on a scale the West hasn't seen in decades. Once stable nations like Sweden, France, and the UK now feel almost unrecognizable. On this channel, I've often explored the challenges facing Europe, Australia, Canada, and even the United States. But today, I want to strip it back to the core, the fundamental question that underpins all of these issues. And that question is simple. Is Islam compatible with Western civilization? If you've been watching this channel for a while, or even just have a rudimentary understanding of Islam, you probably already know the answer. But knowing the answer doesn't mean it's widely understood in the modern West. In fact, there has been a deliberate effort to convince people that Islam is not only compatible with Western civilization, but that it belongs at the very heart of it. From Sharia courts and advisors in the UK to taxpayer-funded hotlines policing so-called Islamophobia, to the indifference shown when critics of Islam, including ex-Muslims, faced threats and violence, the truth has been blurred, and the Red-Green Alliance has grown significantly in its influence since 2023. So let's start with Western civilization. It's best understood as a bundle of institutions that elevate the individual over tribe or clerical authority. Its roots run from Magna Carta, which places rulers under law, through the English Bill of Rights, and the Enlightenment ideas of Locke, Montesquieu, and Mill. The American and French revolutions then codified natural rights and consent of the governed into written constitutions and declarations. At the core are a few non-negotiables. First, secular governance. The state does not enforce theology. In practice, this looks like the US First Amendment's establishment and free exercise clauses, France's laïcité law of 1905 separating church and state, and similar norms in Canada, the UK, Australia, and much of Europe. Citizens may be devout or atheist, convert or leave a faith, without the state punishing belief. Second, the freedom of speech and conscience. Western systems treat speech as a safety valve for social conflict. The US protects even offensive speech barring direct incitement. Europe balances expression with narrow limits under Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights. Criticizing religions, ideologies, and public figures is lawful, and blasphemy laws have been repealed or lie dormant across most of the West. This extends to artistic and satirical expression. Writers, cartoonists, and comedians can lampoon prophets, governments, or cultural norms without fear of legal punishment. Third, equality before the law and due process. Independent courts, habeas corpus presumption of innocence, jury trials in many jurisdictions, and civilian control of the police and military. Legal hierarchies based on sex, lineage, or creed are rejected. This trajectory includes abolition of slavery, universal suffrage, anti-discrimination statutes, and equal civil marriage in many countries. Women not only vote, but participate freely in politics, education, and the workforce. They choose how to dress, whether modestly or not, and enjoy legal protections against coercion. Fourth, pluralism and democratic accountability. Power changes hands by ballots, not by clerics. Minorities retain rights even when unpopular. Civil society, free media, universities, unions, and religious groups operates independently of the state. LGBTQ citizens openly advocate for rights and win legal recognition, while minority faiths freely build places of worship. These values are not always perfectly applied, but they are encoded in law, enforced by courts, and taught as civic norms. They form the baseline by which any ideology's compatibility with the modern West is judged. So, what about Islam? Unlike Western civilization, which evolved towards separating religion from government, Islam has from the very beginning been both a faith and a political legal order. Muhammad was not only a prophet, but also a statesman and military commander. The Quran and Hadith are not limited to personal spirituality. They lay out rules for family life, inheritance, business transactions, punishments, governance, and even how wars should be fought. Islamic law, known as Sharia, is not considered optional guidance, but the literal command of God. To ignore it is, by definition, to disobey Allah. The Quran itself insists on this fusion of religion and state. Early Islamic empires, from the Rashidun Caliphate through to the Ottomans, structured their legitimacy on precisely this principle. Political rulers and religious authorities worked hand in hand. Caliphs enforced Sharia, and clerics determined its interpretation. Unlike the West, where kings were eventually forced to yield power to parliaments and secular law, in Islam, the clerics were the law. The first major clash with Western values comes on freedom of belief. In the modern West, citizens are free to adopt, reject, or change religions, or to have no religion at all. By contrast, in Islam, apostasy, or leaving the faith, is treated as treason. The Hadith states this clearly. Historically, apostates were executed, banished, or stripped of property rights. And these precedents live on. Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Afghanistan all enforce capital punishment for apostasy. Pakistan's laws criminalize insults to the Prophet, with dozens on death row for blasphemy. Even where formal executions are rare, mob justice fills the gap. Lynchings in Pakistan and Bangladesh, or imprisonment of ex-Muslims across the Middle East. Compare this to the West, where abandoning Christianity or Judaism is a personal choice, not a crime. I've seen this up close. I was born in the Maldives, a country that proudly claims to be 100% Muslim. There, publicly leaving Islam means losing your citizenship. Apostates face life imprisonment, or more often than not, worse. Speech is another glaring contrast. In Western societies, satire, criticism, and debate are foundational. You can draw cartoons of Jesus, lampoon politicians, or attack ideologies without fear of execution. In Islam, however, criticism of Muhammad or the Quran is blasphemy and carries capital punishment. This isn't theoretical. We can look at Theo van Gogh in the Netherlands, Charlie Hebdo in Paris, and French teacher Samuel Paty. All of these stem directly from the belief that speech against the Prophet is intolerable. Even outside the Muslim world, global protests erupted over Danish cartoons in 2005, showing how deeply this belief persists. Western blasphemy laws were repealed decades ago. In Islam, they remain entrenched. And when you're talking about controversial issues like this, you quickly realize how fragile free expression really is, even online. Governments monitor, activists report, and critics are silenced. That's exactly why I use Proton VPN and why I think you should too. They're based in Switzerland, outside the reach of US, EU, UK, and Australian law. They don't keep logs and are built by the same team behind Proton Mail. When the UK passed its surveillance laws, Proton VPN became the #1 app on the App Store. Their stealth protocol beats censorship firewalls. Secure Core routes your traffic through privacy-first countries, and NetShield blocks trackers before they ever reach you. I've used Proton Mail since Australia announced sweeping surveillance laws last year, and I'm not exaggerating when I say it's now essential. If you want to protect your privacy and support this channel, hit the link below to get up to 60% off Proton VPN. Western systems insist that all citizens stand equal before the law, regardless of sex, faith, or origin. In Islam, Sharia enforces hierarchy. Non-Muslims historically lived under the dhimmi system, allowed to practice their faith, but forced to pay the jizya tax and accept second-class status. Women too are unequal under the law. A woman's testimony in court is worth half of a man's, daughters inherit half the shares of sons, and women are bound by dress codes and guardianship laws. Modern examples are everywhere. Iran jails women who refuse compulsory hijab. Saudi Arabia only allowed women to drive in 2018. In Afghanistan, girls are banned from schools past primary age. Western women can wear what they want, pursue careers, and inherit equally. Under Islam, the law itself encodes their subordination. This is actually measurable today. Year after year, the UN's Gender Equality Index and the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report rank Muslim-majority countries near the very bottom. This is the practical outcome of laws and norms rooted in Islamic teachings. Finally, pluralism and democratic accountability, cornerstones of the West, are alien to Islam's model. In Western systems, governments derive legitimacy from the people, power changes hands peacefully, and minorities retain rights. In Islam, ultimate sovereignty belongs to God. Islamic thinkers like Sayyid Qutb declare democracy a form of idolatry because it elevates human will above divine command. The Iranian system today reflects this. Citizens vote, but clerics vet the candidates, ensuring no law contradicts Sharia. Pakistan's constitution enshrines Islam as a state religion, with blasphemy laws punishing dissent. In Saudi Arabia and the Maldives, churches and temples cannot legally be built. Public expressions of another faith are criminalized. So when you line them up side by side, the incompatibility becomes obvious. Western civilization involved institutions that safeguard the individual, speech, conscience, equality, democracy. Islam by design enforces the supremacy of religion over the individual. Where the West says you are free, Islam says you must submit. And these are living laws enforced today across the Muslim world, and defended even within Western societies through censorship and intimidation. It should be obvious by now that Islam isn't just different from the West, it's the opposite. But here's the part that should worry us most. These ideas aren't locked away in distant countries. They are already here, slowly infiltrating and exerting growing influence in Western societies. Look around. In the UK, Sharia councils already operate in parallel to civil courts, handling family disputes according to Islamic law. In France, police have admitted there are neighborhoods they hesitate to enter, effectively no-go zones. In Sweden, once held up as the model of liberal democracy, women now report avoiding certain areas because of harassment and intimidation. These aren't isolated stories. They are glimpses of what happens when Western institutions bend under pressure. And governments are bending. In Britain, politicians openly admit they tread carefully around Muslim voting blocs in marginal seats. One wrong stance on issues like Israel, free speech, or cousin marriage, and they risk losing their position. In Australia, we are beginning to see the same dynamic take shape, where demographic numbers increasingly dictate policy silence on extremism or foreign influence. Now imagine what happens as this influence grows. Women's rights begin to erode, with modesty codes enforced socially, if not legally. Free speech is chilled, as criticism of Islam is branded hate speech. Ex-Muslims and critics live in fear, knowing violent reprisals are a very real risk. LGBT rights are rolled back. Look at the UK's Trojan horse school scandal, or the protests in Birmingham against LGBT education, driven largely by Muslim groups. Even terror risks get brushed under the carpet for fear of being accused of Islamophobia. And this is the crossroads we now face. Western civilization can either stand firm on the principles that made it free, or allow them to be eroded under the weight of appeasement and fear. The question isn't simply whether Islam is compatible with the West, it's whether the West still believes enough in itself to defend what it stands for. Hey, you made it to the end. As always, don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, and give the video a thumbs up. It really helps. A massive thank you to all my channel members and Patreon supporters. You're the reason I can keep making content like this. If you want to support the channel, consider joining the crew. Just hit the join button below or head over to Patreon. Even a small pledge goes a long way, and I would genuinely love to have you on board. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.